Hello everybody and welcome back to the Gaming Graveyard. Today we'll be talking about Ubisoft Singapore's debut title, Skull and Bones, the world's first ever quadruple A game that took 11 years of development and over $700 million to get her done. This was a relatively unsuccessful pirate game that was initially supposed to be an expansion to Black Flag. This expansion then kind of morphed into an MMO based on Black Flag. Then it kind of turned into a weird online multiplayer pirate thing that it is today, with absolutely no relation to the original source material. So without further ado, let's get into the turbulent history of Skull and Bones.
Here with IGN News, Neversoft, the developer that brought us the Tony Hawk and several Guitar Hero games, is no more.
In a statement via Game Informer, Disney confirms LucasArts has been closed.
We have reached the decision to close Lionhead Studios. We have nothing but heartfelt thanks from the team at Lionhead.
Breaking, Warner Brothers Games is shutting down Monolith Productions, Player First Games, and WB San Diego.
The game is being shut down. This news came out literally 10 minutes ago. X-Defiant is done. They are sunsetting the game.
The story of Skull and Bones begins in 2013, where after the success of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Ubisoft greenlit an expansion to the game. This expansion would be more focused on the pirate ship gameplay that the game had done so well and that was beloved by many. This expansion would also be headed by a relatively new studio at the time, Ubisoft Singapore. Ubisoft Singapore had been mainly a support studio, and their founding was dedicated to being one. They had worked mostly on Assassin's Creed games as a secondary developer, as well as a random Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles remaster, but they were never the primary developer on any of those games, and I assure you, you didn't want them to be. So in Ubisoft's head, they were handing a support studio support work. Essentially, you're handing them a game that is already finished, you're telling them, hey guys, we want this to be more pirate ship oriented, but in the same universe. So take the assets that were already created for you and just rework them into this new vision. It really isn't that hard, and any developer should be able to handle such a simple task. But of course, by the 11 years of development, you would know that Ubisoft Singapore was not just any other developer. And for a lot of reasons that we're going to get into later, this was not an easy task. These early days of this expansion were very hard to research, as at this point there is no real public knowledge of what was going on behind the scenes. But what we do know is that it was going to be at least relatively similar to what we got with Skull and Bones at its launch. The expansion version of this expansion was short-lived, as pretty quickly Ubisoft Singapore maybe got a little too inspired and kind of started morphing the game into an MMO that was again mostly based on the ship combat from Black Flag. And with the game basically morphing into an MMO, they just decided to full-on reboot the game to make it an MMO, with them dubbing it internally Black Flag Infinite. Black Flag Infinite was an unbelievably short-lived project, only lasting around a year or two from 2014 to 2015. It was inevitably cancelled as the technology they were using, which had been used since 2011, was becoming quite outdated. And with the axe coming down, normally that's where the gaming story ends, but Ubisoft Singapore believed so much in their vision that they re-picked up the idea and put it on newer technology, this time changing it into a multiplayer ship fighting game rather than an MMO. Ubisoft at this point had basically only greenlit this project because Ubisoft Singapore had already cost them $200 million on the cancelled expansion and the MMO, which neither were coming out. So at this point, Ubisoft was desperate to get some sort of bang for their buck out of this whole ordeal. I'm almost 99% certain that if Ubisoft Singapore came up to Ubisoft and said, hey, I'm going to be making this random ship game that kind of maybe works with the same thing that we were kind of doing with the other game, they would have greenlit that shit. Ubisoft was desperate. This desperation led Ubisoft to make I like to call a brain-dead business decision. After 6 or so months of developing this new version of the game, Ubisoft decided to take money from the Singaporean government to get the game done. For those of you that don't know what's coming, this might sound like a great business move. However, this business move ended with them not being able to cancel the game under any circumstances or God will strike them down. Yeah, so now the game couldn't be canceled under any circumstances. I mean, it theoretically could, but there'd be a lot of legal things to go through, and Ubisoft wasn't doing all that shit. Money go boom. But with the backing of the government, they had to get the game out the door, so from 2016 to 2017, they just really continued the development and trying to flesh out what they wanted this game to be. Later down the line of this development in 2017, Ubisoft must have been absolutely astonished by what they were seeing because only a year into its developmental cycle, Ubisoft gave it an E3 appearance at E3 2017. At this very E3, Ubisoft revealed Skull and Bones and its first ever trailer. This trailer would make it pretty abundantly clear what they were trying to do with this game. It was going to be a 5v5 pirate warship fighting game where you are locked to your ship. There was no boarding, and it made it clear in the trailer that there would be no boarding. It would simply show a cutscene and then put you back on your ship. The game mode they showed off was dubbed Loot Hunt, where both teams would fight in 5v5 combat on their ship, and whoever gathered the most loot would win. The concept was very simple, but kind of unique to a point. There really wasn't any other pirate game or ship game that was trying to do something similar to Skull and Bones. Not that that's necessarily a good thing for Skull and Bones. This trailer was clearly in its early days. Skull and Bones very obviously was not releasing tomorrow or this year. It was going to need some time. For many though, the lack of boarding or combat in general outside of ship combat was kind of diminishing a lot of the excitement that players of Black Flag had for the game. Despite the disappointment and despite the trailer looking very much so in its early days, Ubisoft just kept pushing forward and claimed that the game would be launching in 2018, just a year after the trailer. It wasn't improbable per se, but it just did not seem like the game was fully prepared for that release date. There was pretty much nothing from Skull and Bones from 2017's E3 to 2018's E3, and just a week before 2018's E3, it was confirmed that Skull and Bones would be delayed to 2019. There really wasn't much being said about why the game was being delayed, other than the fact that they kind of pinned it on Ubisoft Singapore being completely inexperienced. Normally when companies delay a game, they don't show up to the same year's E3 because, well, they're not going to be making that year's release date and it's kind of pointless. However, Skull and Bones disagreed, and they would show up to 2018's E3 just a week after they delayed the game. This trailer that they showed off at E3 was actually pretty impressive, unlike the last one. The graphics didn't look terrible for 2019, the gameplay looked pretty smooth, and the shipbuilding was even shown off to have some really cool features. It had a leveling system and a rarity system that came along with the items that you put on your ship. This trailer was more focused around traveling the open world, and although the open world did look rather boring, even in the trailer, it was still not really that important because most of the game's heavy lifting was going to be done by the game modes inside the game. Those game modes were most likely going to provide more of an engaging experience than just looting the open world, as that is in most open world games kind of boring. The consensus coming out of E3 was that it isn't really anything crazy, it's not going to be anything groundbreaking, but it should provide at least a decent time for a few months. However, for Ubisoft, that really wasn't going to be good enough because they had pumped anywhere from $300 to $400 million into Skull and Bones by this point, which, yes, if you're asking, Ubisoft had lost their damn minds. Without basically a single word being said after the delay and the trailer being out, many considered another delay, this time most likely to 2020, was most certainly going to happen. Heading into 2019, it was officially confirmed that Skull and Bones would be delayed once more. It was delayed to sometime in 2020, but it was rumored or kind of being hinted at in early March, maybe later. Now with that delay behind us, let me bring you behind the scenes during this time. During all the rebooting and all of this reworking of Skull and Bones, Ubisoft Singapore has had 3 different creative leads. They all pretty much had completely overhauled the game when they took over. This is what led to those massive delays from 2017 to 2020 and possibly even later down the line. The delay to 2020 wouldn't last very long, as during an investors call in late 2019, Ubisoft would confirm that the game would once again slip, this time to 2021, and more likely as late as 2022. Heading into 2020, Ubisoft would reveal that these delays were mostly because the game was going down a new path or a new vision once again. But thankfully, this new vision was not being solo developed by Ubisoft Singapore, with Ubisoft Berlin stepping in and co-developing it. The hope, obviously, is that Ubisoft Berlin would step in and co-develop it with them and actually point Ubisoft Singapore down a line that would involve them doing their jobs. Because by this point, Ubisoft had sank at least $400 million into the game and wanted to cancel it. But due to gaining that Singaporean assistance, they couldn't, so the game had to keep going. And keep going they did, as heading into 2021, after so many delays, Ubisoft would once again confirm another delay. The game would slip to 2022 or as late as 2023. This delay was afforded to the fact that the game was once again shifting focus, with Ubisoft confirming that the game would be moving to a new upgraded version of the engine it was already running on, so that way it would be properly ported over to the Xbox Series S and X, as well as the PlayStation 5. Obviously, if you port Xbox One technology to the Series X and S or the PlayStation 5, it's not going to look very good. So the hope is that maybe it'll look better. And at this very moment, I blame Ubisoft for the fact that they're now going to spend an extra few $100 million because of this decision. Why would you give a studio that you know is not getting that game out the door more time to not get that game out the door? It's just so stupid, but Ubisoft is gonna Ubisoft, I guess. I don't know. Heading into 2022, Ubisoft would confirm that the game would ship on November 8th, 2022. At the end of this reveal of the release date, Ubisoft would also confirm that it is now a next-gen exclusive, and that the porting work is no longer port work, it's just the full-fledged game. However, heading into that brand new shiny release date, Ubisoft in September, just 2 months before the game was going to release, confirmed that yeah, that shit, it ain't coming out. And they once again pushed the game, this time to early 2023. And yes, you already know what's coming. Heading into early 2023, Ubisoft would once again confirm that that game ain't coming out, and it would be pushed to late 2023, but most likely 2024. At this point, there's no hype around this game. Trailers aren't even coming out anymore. Ubisoft has seemingly fully given up on this game, but seemingly is still pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into the game, so that doesn't make much sense. But either way, heading into 2023, Ubisoft confirmed that on August 25th, you would be able to get your hands on a closed beta version of the game. So finally, you would be able to get your hands on this game that you probably don't even care about. This closed beta wasn't perfectly received, and if I'm being completely honest, it was kind of just boring. Many called it a sluggish pirate game where boarding wasn't even possible, ruining most of what made Black Flag even entertaining to begin with. Despite these complaints, Ubisoft had sank over $650 million into the game by this point, and that shit, it was coming out. And Ubisoft confirmed that the game was going to release on February 16th, 2024. And on top of that release date, Ubisoft confirmed that the game would be a live service pirate game for $70. And pretty much everybody lost their minds immediately and said, yo, we ain't playing that shit. So Ubisoft CEO, shortly after that announcement and shortly before release on February 9th, decided to try and calm some fears, and he decided to proclaim that Skull and Bones, the game that has been in development hell for 11 years, the first ever quadruple A live service game. And for that matter, the first ever quadruple A game. This, of course, did very little to boost the game's appearance in the public. Pretty much everybody just said, yo, this guy's lost his goddamn mind, and just didn't buy it. Skull and Bones would officially release on February 16th of 2024, and when it didn't do all that well. Reviewers tarnished the game for being mediocre. It just wasn't anything impressive, and it had the cardinal sin of just being boring. Gamers would have a similar reaction to the game's release, with them simply saying, why did you release this game in the first place? Why did you spend so much money on this game in the first place? And oh yeah, most importantly, Why did you give it to Ubisoft Singapore? All of which would never really have an answer. The game at launch would have a peak of 800,000 players, although that may seem pretty high, and that may seem pretty good, most of which were most likely from Ubisoft's free trial, as currently on Steam it only has 45 players playing it right now. Ubisoft is still supporting Skull and Bones, so I guess technically the gaming graveyard doesn't fit in this scenario because it's not dead. But that shit's dead. I mean, we can all unanimously agree like that no one's playing that game. And normally when I make these videos, I have people in the comments section that say, you know what, that game really wasn't that bad. Just go look at my Brink video. Everyone was like, you know what, Brink wasn't that bad. If you say that here, I'm calling bullshit. This game was bad. The long developmental history of Skull and Bones is the main reason why it's bad. And it's also quite literally the problem with the gaming industry. You can't spend $850 million on a stupid little fucking pirate game and expect for it to turn a profit. It's just not a reasonable expectation. At the end of the day, Skull and Bones will probably continue to get support as Ubisoft desperately says, please, for the love of God, buy my pirate game so I don't go bankrupt. But if I'm being honest, I don't think it's going to work. They should have just canceled this game, ate the legal backlash from the Singaporean government, and said, fuck it. You know, at this point, we're screwed either way. Releasing this game and giving it support is only going to cost us more money and servers and all that nonsense to upkeep it. But Ubisoft didn't make that decision. Thank you guys for watching. I know that this may be seen as more of a low quality video, and that's because I'm kind of in the middle of editing a bunch of other things, and I'm also looking for an editor to hopefully help with the workload. So if you know how to edit or you're trying to get into it, reach out to me on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube comments. It really doesn't matter. I will reach back out and see what you have worked on or what your experience is, and if it's nothing, then maybe we can still work something out. My next video is hopefully going to be more high quality because I've released 3 in the past few days, so it's been a lot of work. But trust me, higher quality videos are on the way. Whether I have to pay an editor or not, I will get high quality videos to you. Thank you for watching. If you really enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. And click a video at the end of this because that helps the video, I think, or something. I don't know.